Story 1.
I'm Jake, just a regular guy from a small town in Oregon. Me, my pal Mike, and our girls, Sarah and Emily, thought hitting the Cascades for a hiking weekend was the ticket. We were all about ditching the boring daily grind. Day 1 was epic. We pitched tents by a creek, the water's murmur mixing with our laughs. Mike's one-liners had us rolling. Sarah and Emily, tight since forever, clicked their cameras at every scenic corner. Chillin' with them, life felt good. Come dusk, the vibe was perfect. Campfire crackling, marshmallows toasting, and Emily strumming her guitar. We belted out tunes, off-key, but who cared, right? But as night crept in, things got freaky. The usually lively forest went dead silent. Sarah, who's usually cool as a cucumber, said she felt eyes on us. We shrugged it off, joking it was her wild imagination. Then the weirdness amped up. Bushes rustling, twigs snapping. Mike cracked a Bigfoot joke, but his chuckle faded fast when this deep animal growl echoed around us. Sarah screamed, pointing to glowing eyes in the trees. We freaked, killed the fire, thinking darkness was our ally. Huddled together, the sound of whatever was out there circled us. Emily, voice shaky, mentioned the Wendigo, a legend around these parts, a forest spirit with a taste for humans. Sounded like a campfire tale, but her terror was real. The growling inched closer. In a panic, we bolted. Dashing through the woods, the growls chased us, a soundtrack to our terror. Branches lashed us as we ran blindly. We stumbled on an old ranger station, door ajar. We dove in, barricading the door. The night dragged on, filled with growls and scratches from outside. Time warped in our fear, bubble. Down broke, the noises stopped. We piqued outside, half expecting the Wendigo's ambush. But nothing, just a calm forest greeting the day. Our camp was trashed, tents shredded, stuff everywhere. And then we saw them, huge, unworldly footprints leading back into the woods. We didn't hang around. Grabbed our wrecked gear and hightailed it home. The whole way back, nobody said a word, each of us lost in our heads, trying to make sense of it. Back home, things felt off. The hike was supposed to be a break from the mundane, but it turned into this horror story we couldn't shake. We'd meet up, trying to act normal, but the tension was always there. The memory of that night hung over us like a dark cloud. One evening, a couple of weeks later, we gathered at my place. The plan was to chill and watch a movie, but none of us could focus. Every little noise had us jumping. That's when Sarah suggested we go back. Go back? To that place? She said we needed closure, to face our fears or something like that. Mike and Emily were hesitant, but something about Sarah's determination got to us. So, we agreed. One last trip to put this whole Wendigo thing to bed. We arrived in daylight, the forest looking less menacing under the sun. Our steps were cautious, eyes darting around, half expecting those glowing eyes to appear any moment. We reached our old campsite, and it looked just like any other spot in the woods. Peaceful. We didn't set up camp. No way we were spending another night. But we stayed there for hours talking, trying to laugh it off. As the sun began to set, that unease crept back in. We decided it was time to leave. Just as we were about to head back, Mike froze. "Do you guys hear that?" he whispered. We listened. A faint, distant sound, like a mix between a howl and a scream, sent shivers down our spines. It was coming from deeper in the woods, the same direction those footprints had headed. Without a word, we turned and started walking back to the car, faster and faster until we were practically jogging. No one wanted to say it, but the fear was back. The fear of being watched. Hunted. We reached the car, and I swear, none of us had ever been so relieved to see a vehicle. We piled in, and I floored it, leaving a cloud of dust behind. As we drove, nobody spoke. Each lost in their thoughts, replaying the sounds and sights. We dropped off Sarah and Emily first. They hugged us, said goodbye, but their eyes told a story of lingering fear. Mike stayed over at my place that night. We tried to distract ourselves with games and TV, but it was useless. Every creak of the house, every shadow from the corner of our eyes had us on edge. The next morning, I found Mike in the living room, staring out of the window. He turned to me, his face pale. "I saw it, Jake," he whispered. "Last night, in the backyard. It was there, watching us." I didn't know what to believe. Was it our minds playing tricks, or had the Wendigo followed us home? The uncertainty of it all was the worst part. We never did go back to those woods, and we never talked much about that night again. But sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I can't help but wonder if it's really just the wind or something else, calling from the depths of the forest.
Story 2.
As a city kid, I never bought into the whole great outdoors hype. But when my college buddy, Dave, convinced me to join him and a couple of others for a camping trip in the Rockies, I figured, why not? Maybe a change of scenery would do me good. The group included Dave, his girlfriend Lila, our mutual friend Mark, and me, Tyler. We reached our campsite late afternoon. It was breathtaking, with towering pines and a crystal clear lake. Dave and Mark, the experienced campers, set up while Lila and I gathered firewood. As night fell, we sat around the fire, roasting hot dogs and sharing laughs. Lila, a fan of spooky stories, brought up local legends. "Ever heard of the Wendigo?" she asked, her eyes wide. Mark scoffed, but Dave and I were all ears. Layla, with a dramatic flair, described it as a cannibalistic spirit, a once-human creature turned into a monster by greed and desperation. I chuckled, thinking it was just another campfire story. Suffer, da. But as the night wore on, a dense fog rolled in, blanketing the woods in an eerie silence. The fire crackled and popped, the only sound in the otherwise still night. Suddenly, we heard a distant guttural howl. Mark joked it was the Wendigo, but his laugh sounded forced. Unease settled among us. Around midnight, Dave suggested we hit the sack. We'd planned a hike early next morning. I shared a tent with Mark, while Dave and Lila bunked in another. I drifted off quickly, exhausted from the day. I awoke to Mark shaking me. "Tyler, do you hear that?" he whispered, panic in his voice. I listened. Thumps and rustling came from outside. Heart pounding, I peeked out. Through the fog, I saw a tall, gaunt figure near the trees, its eyes glinting in the moonlight. I gasped, pulling back. "Let's check it out," Mark said, grabbing a flashlight. I thought he was nuts, but curiosity got the better of me. We quietly stepped out, the cold air biting at our skin. The figure was gone, but the rustling continued. We crept towards the trees, the beam of our flashlight cutting through the fogs. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. We froze. It was Lila. We bolted back, hearts racing. We found Dave, white as a sheet, outside their tent. "Lila, she's gone," he stammered, pointing to the woods. Without thinking, we plunged into the forest, calling her name. The fog grew thicker, the terrain rougher. We stumbled over roots and rocks, desperation fueling us. Then, in a small clearing, we found her. Lila, lifeless, her body twisted unnaturally. Above her loomed the creature from the legends, the Wendigo, its eyes cold and dead, its mouth dripping with fresh blood. We were paralyzed with horror. The creature turned to us, emitting a spine-chilling growl. We ran, not looking back, driven by primal fear. The woods became a blur as we dashed through, the Wendigo's howls echoing behind us. We reached the campsite, gasping for Ish. Without wasting a second, we grabbed the keys to Dave's truck and scrambled inside. I looked back one last time, seeing the Wendigo's silhouette in the distance, a haunting reminder of the nightmare we'd lived. As we drove away, the weight of what happened crashed down on us. Lila was gone, taken by the very legend we'd laughed at hours before. We were safe, but at what cost? Oh, the Wendigo remained in those woods, a hidden terror lurking in those shadows, a reminder of the thin line between myths and reality. Our escape was pure luck, a twist of fate. We lost a friend to the Wendigo, a fate we narrowly escaped. The story of our encounter, unbelievable yet true, would haunt us forever, a chilling tale of a camping trip gone horrifically wrong. Back in the city, we struggled to return to our normal lives. The police didn't believe our story. Who would? They said Lila had probably gotten lost in the woods, but we knew the truth. The Wendigo had claimed her, and with her, a part of each of us. Nights became restless, filled with dreams of foggy forests and glowing eyes. We never spoke of it again, each of us carrying the burden of that night alone. The Wendigo, a legend we had laughed at, had become a terrifying reality. And somewhere in the depths of the Rockies, it still roamed, a reminder of the thin line between myth and reality.
Story 3.
I've always been a loner, a man of the lake and woods, they'd call me. Name's Hank. For years I cast my line into the serene waters of Clearwater Lake, nestled deep in the heart of the forest. It was my retreat, my slice of heaven. But one fateful day, that sanctuary became a living nightmare. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the mist hugs the lake like a lover. I settled into my old, creaky rowboat with nothing but my fishing gear and the promise of a peaceful day. The lake was calm, the fish were biting, and life was good, and that's when things took a turn. It started subtly. The birds stopped singing, and the gentle lapping of water against the boat ceased, as if the lake itself held its breath. A cold breeze swept over me, carrying a faint, unidentifiable odor, a mix of decay and cold, raw hunger. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter around me, figuring it was just a shift in the weather. Then came the whispers. Indistinct at first, like leaves rustling in the wind, but there was an intention behind them, a malicious cadence that set my nerves on edge. I glanced around, my fisherman's instincts on high alert. Nothing but the dense thicket of trees and the gray expanse of water. I decided to pack it up, the unease in my gut growing. That's when I saw it, a shadow, tall and gaunt, shifting between the trees on the shore. I rubbed my eyes, thinking the solitude was messing with my head, but there it was again, closer this time, its movements unnatural, jerky. Panic set in. I grabbed the oars and rowed with all my might, but the boat felt like it was moving through molasses. The shadow emerged from the trees, taking form, the Wendigo. I'd heard the old tales, the warnings whispered around campfires. A creature born from darkness and insatiable hunger, its very presence a corruption of nature. And now, it stood before me, its eyes hollow pits of despair, its mouth a gaping void of sharp, gnashing teeth. I rowed frantically, my heart pounding against my ribs like a caged animal. The Wendigo mirrored my movements along the shore, its gait eerily silent. I could feel its gaze piercing through me, a predator sizing up its prey. As the shore neared, a guttural roar filled the air. The Wendigo lunged, its form a blur of speed and fury. I raised my arm in defense, a futile gesture against such a force. Pain exploded through my body as its claws raked through flesh and bone, severing my arm from my body. I screamed, my vision red with agony, as I tumbled into the murky depths of the lake. Somehow, by some miracle or sheer force of will, I made it to the shore. The Wendigo was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I lay there, my lifeblood seeping into the earth, the pain a constant reminder of the horror I'd faced. They found me at dawn, the locals who'd come searching when I hadn't returned. They saved my life, but the scars run deeper than the flesh. The Wendigo is out there, a shadow in the woods, a whisper on the wind. And I, forever changed, bear its mark, a man left with not just a missing arm but a soul forever haunted by the creature of the forest.